My name is Ella, and for the past 2 years, I've been watching my husband, Mark, slowly fade away. When we first got the diagnosis of stomach cancer, I remember feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. Mark was only 38, successful in his investment banking career, and we had a beautiful 9-year-old son, Ethan. We were supposed to have decades ahead of us. The one small blessing in this nightmare was that Mark's financial success meant we could afford the best treatment available. We flew to specialists across the country, tried experimental therapies, and spared no expense. But as the months dragged on, it became clear that all this treatment was just buying time, not offering a cure. Through it all, Mark's parents, Linda and Robert, were our rocks. They lived just 20 minutes away and stepped in without hesitation when things got tough. "Ella, we'll pick Ethan up from school today," Linda would say on days when Mark was scheduled for treatment. "Don't worry about dinner either. I've made extra lasagna." Ethan would often tug on my sleeve when I tucked him in at night, his eyes wide with hope and fear. "Mom, when is Dad going to get better?" I never knew what to say. How do you tell a child that his father is dying? So I'd just stroke his hair and say, "The doctors are trying their best, sweetie." My own parents, on the other hand, were a different story. My mother, Karen, and my father, David, lived just as close as Mark's parents, but they might as well have been on another planet. "Mom, can you pick up Ethan from school today? Mark has a bad reaction to the chemo and Linda has a doctor's appointment." "Oh, Ella, I'm so sorry, but we promised to help your sister with her apartment hunting today. You know how Jessica gets when she's stressed." It was always Jessica. It had been that way my entire life. When I was 7, my parents missed my school play because Jessica had a cold. When I graduated high school, they left right after the ceremony to get to Jessica's dance recital, even though she was just in the ensemble. I'd gotten used to it over the years. Mark became my family, and his parents treated me more like a daughter than my own ever did. So when Mark's condition took a turn for the worse last month, I braced myself for the end, surrounded by the family that had chosen me. The night Mark died, I was holding his hand. His breathing had become shallow hours before, and the hospice nurse had warned me it wouldn't be long. "Ella," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Take care of Ethan. You're the strongest person I know." Those were his last words. I sat there for hours after, still holding his hand as it grew cold, unable to process that my partner of 12 years was gone. Linda and Robert arrived at the hospital within an hour of my call, their faces etched with the same grief that was consuming me. "We're here, sweetheart," Linda said, wrapping her arms around me. "We'll always be here." That night, I sent a text to my mother, "Mark passed away tonight." Her response came an hour later, "It's terrible." No call, no offer to come over, no question about how Ethan and I were doing. Just 2 words. But I was too numb to care. There was a funeral to plan, a son to console, and a life to somehow piece back together. The days after Mark's death passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, paperwork, and trying to explain to Ethan that his father wasn't coming home. Linda and Robert were there every step of the way, handling calls to the funeral home when I couldn't form words, and sitting with Ethan when he had questions I couldn't answer. The day before the funeral, I was drowning in details. The funeral home needed final decisions on the program, distant relatives were calling for directions, and I still needed to pick up Ethan's suit. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since Mark died. "I need to ask my parents to watch Ethan," I told Linda as we sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by sympathy cards. "You and Robert are already doing so much." I drove Ethan to my parents' house, rehearsing what I would say. When we arrived, my mother opened the door wearing a light jacket, purse already in hand. "Ella, this isn't a good time," she said, not even inviting us in. "We're just heading out." "Mom, please, it's just for a few hours. I have to finalize everything for the funeral, Anne." "We've had these plans for weeks," my father cut in, appearing behind my mother. "We can't cancel now." Before I could argue further, they both stepped outside, locking the door behind them. We really have to go, my mother said firmly. I'm sure you can find someone else. They hurried to their car without so much as a goodbye to Ethan, who stood there confused and hurt. Once they drove away, I called my friend Sarah, who immediately agreed to watch him. After dropping Ethan at Sarah's house, curiosity got the better of me. I took a detour past my parents' house on my way home. Their lights were on, and Jessica's red Mazda was parked in the driveway. So that's the important plans, I muttered to myself, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. They weren't busy at all, they just preferred helping Jessica to supporting me, even now. That evening, I sent a message to our family WhatsApp group. Mark's funeral is at 11 a.m. on Thursday at Greenwood Chapel. Service will be followed by a small reception. I watched as the read receipts appeared next to my parents' and Jessica's names. No one replied. The night before the funeral, anxiety drove me to call my mother directly. Mom, you saw my message about the funeral tomorrow, right? It starts at 11. There was a pause on the line. Oh, Ella, I'm sorry, but we won't be able to make it. Jessica has booked several tables at Emilio's to celebrate her promotion. It's at noon, and we've already committed. I nearly dropped the phone. Mom, this is Mark's funeral we're talking about. Mark, who paid for the repairs on your house 3 years ago when the roof collapsed. Mark, who has been part of our family for over a decade. That was a long time ago, Ella, my mother replied coldly. We need to focus on the living, not the dead. Jessica needs our support right now. Before I could respond, she hung up. I immediately dialed Jessica's number, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. Hey, she answered, sounding annoyed that I'd interrupted her evening. Jessica, Mom says you're having a party tomorrow at the same time as Mark's funeral. Can't you reschedule? Or at least push it back so they can attend the service first? No way, she scoffed, I can't change the reservation now. Everyone's already confirmed, and this promotion is a big deal. It's not like I can reschedule a funeral party or whatever. A funeral party? I repeated, my voice rising. My husband is dead, Jessica. The man who paid for your entire college education. That was ages ago, she dismissed. Look, my promotion is more important than some funeral. People die every day. Then she hung up too. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still in hand, utterly stunned. As if to twist the knife further, my phone pinged with a message from my mother. Stop pressuring your sister. Her celebration is more important than some funeral. She's worked hard for this promotion. The day of Mark's funeral dawned bright and clear, a mockery of the darkness I felt inside. The service was beautiful in its simplicity. Mark had never been one for elaborate displays, and the modest chapel was filled with people who had genuinely cared for him, colleagues, friends, neighbors, and family. His family, anyway. During the eulogy, I spoke about Mark's generosity, his kindness, and his unwavering devotion to our son. Ethan sat between Linda and Robert, who held his hands as tears streamed down his face. After the service, several people approached me, offering condolences and asking about my parents' absence. I was surprised not to see your folks, Mark's college roommate said. Are they ill? They had a prior commitment, I replied stiffly, not wanting to elaborate. Linda noticed my discomfort and smoothly steered the conversation elsewhere. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by sympathy cards and flower arrangements. The house felt impossibly empty without Mark, the silence so loud it hurt. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, hope the funeral went okay. Mom posted pics from my party. Got promoted to senior account executive. No condolences. No acknowledgement of what I'd just been through. Just a celebration of her accomplishment, complete with party emojis. I turned off my phone without responding and went upstairs to check on Ethan. He was sleeping soundly, clutching the teddy bear Mark had given him on his last birthday. I crawled into bed beside him, finding comfort in the steady rhythm of his breathing. For the next week, I moved through life in a fog. Linda and Robert came by daily, bringing food, taking Ethan to the park, helping me sort through Mark's belongings. My parents didn't call once. Not to check on their grandson, not to see how I was holding up, nothing. A week after the funeral, I received a call from Mark's lawyer, Mr. Simmons. "Mrs. Turner, it's time to discuss Mark's will," he explained. He was quite thorough in his preparations. Would tomorrow afternoon work for the reading? I agreed, and then called Linda and Robert to invite them. They'd been named in the will, of course, and Mark would have wanted them there. The next day, Mr. Simmons arrived at our house at precisely 2 p.m., carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a somber expression that softened when he saw Ethan. "Your father spoke of you often," he told my son, shaking his small hand formally. "He was very proud of you." We all settled in the living room, me, Ethan, Linda, and Robert, ready for what I expected to be a straightforward reading. Mark and I had discussed his wishes extensively during his illness, so there would be no surprises. But just as Mr. Simmons was about to begin, the doorbell rang. "Are you expecting anyone else?" Linda asked, looking confused. "No," I replied, equally puzzled as I went to answer the door. I nearly slammed it shut when I saw my parents and Jessica standing on the porch, all wearing expressions of exaggerated sympathy. "What are you doing here?" I asked bluntly. "We heard about the will reading," my mother said, trying to look past me into the house. "Mark wasn't a stranger to us, you know. We have a right to be here." "A right?" I repeated incredulously. "You couldn't be bothered to come to his funeral, but you have a right to be at his will reading?" My father cleared his throat. "Now, Ella, there's no need to bring up old grievances. We're here to support you." "Support me?" I laughed bitterly. "That's rich." But before I could shut the door, my mother gently pushed past me, with my father and Jessica following close behind. "We're family," she said firmly, as if that explained everything. I stood there, stunned by their audacity, as they made their way to the living room. Linda and Robert's faces darkened when they saw who had arrived. "What are they doing here?" Robert whispered when I returned. "I have no idea," I replied, my hands shaking with anger. "But I'm not going to make a scene in front of Ethan." Mr. Simmons, ever the professional, merely raised an eyebrow before continuing. "Shall we proceed with the reading of the will?" My parents and Jessica sat on the couch opposite Linda and Robert, with Ethan beside me in an armchair. The tension in the room was suffocating. I, Mark Andrew Turner, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. Mr. Simmons began reading from the formal document. Mark had left everything meticulously organized. To his parents, he left $200,000, enough to ensure their comfortable retirement and to thank them for their unwavering support throughout our marriage and his illness. "We never expected," Linda began, her voice breaking as Robert held her hand tightly. Then came the main provisions. To me, he left our house, 2 apartments in the city center that I hadn't even known he owned, and $400,000 in liquid assets. "The apartments generate significant rental income," Mr. Simmons explained. "Mark purchased them as investments 3 years ago." I sat there, stunned by the extent of Mark's planning. He'd ensured Ethan and I would be financially secure, no matter what. As Mr. Simmons continued reading, I noticed my mother's expression change from feigned sympathy to undisguised interest. Jessica sat up straighter, suddenly paying attention. When the lawyer finished, my mother clapped her hands together. "Well, this is wonderful news, isn't it? Ella, you're quite well off now." The room fell silent. Linda and Robert stared at her in shock. "I mean," my mother continued, oblivious to the tension, "with 2 apartments and all that money, you can certainly help out family now." "Jessica has been struggling with rent on her place, haven't you, dear?" Jessica nodded eagerly. "It's so expensive these days. And you have 2 apartments just sitting there." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband wasn't even cold in his grave, and they were already eyeing his assets. "You should give one of those apartments to Jessica," my father chimed in, as if it were the most reasonable suggestion in the world. "What do you need 2 for anyway?" I stood up slowly, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Are you serious right now? You skip Mark's funeral for a party, ignore me and Ethan for a week, then show up uninvited to his will reading to demand his property? Now, Ella, my father started, his tone condescending, there's no need to be selfish. You're alone now, but you have all this wealth. You should share it. Selfish? I repeated, my voice rising. I'm not alone, I have Ethan. And everything Mark left is for his son's future. Every penny will go toward making sure Ethan has the best education, the best opportunities, the best life his father can no longer be here to provide. I watched as my parents and sister exchanged glances, their eyes flickering to Ethan with something that looked disturbingly like resentment. You're being ridiculous, my mother snapped. Jessica needs help now, not some child who won't even go to college for years. That some child is your grandson, Robert interjected, his voice tight with anger. And his father just died. My mother's face flushed with anger. Don't you dare tell me how to treat my own grandson, she snapped at Robert. We've been in this family longer than you have. And yet you've shown remarkably little interest in being part of it, Linda replied coldly. That's enough, I said firmly, my patience finally snapping. Ethan, can you go upstairs to your room for a little while? Take Mr. Simmons with you to show him your model airplanes. The lawyer, clearly relieved to escape the family drama, quickly stood and took Ethan's hand. I'd love to see your collection, young man. Once they were out of earshot, I turned to my parents and sister, no longer holding back. How dare you come into my house, days after my husband's funeral, that you couldn't be bothered to attend, and demand his money? Mark worked his entire life to provide for me and Ethan. He battled cancer for 2 years, and in all that time, what help did you offer? None. You wouldn't even watch Ethan for a few hours. That's not fair, my father began, but I cut him off. No, what's not fair is that Mark spent thousands of dollars fixing your roof when it collapsed during that storm 3 years ago. What's not fair is that we paid for Jessica's entire college education when you claimed you couldn't afford it. Well, let me make something perfectly clear, I will not be giving any of Mark's money or property to you. Not now, not ever. Every penny will go to supporting Ethan and securing his future. That's what Mark wanted, and that's what will happen. My mother's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful bastard. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Name one thing, one single act of selfless parenting. She opened and closed her mouth, unable to come up with an answer. That's what I thought, I said quietly. I think it's time for you all to leave. The door slammed behind them, and I collapsed onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. You did the right thing, Robert said, his voice gentle but firm. Did I? They're still my parents. And Jessica's still my sister. Biology doesn't make family, Linda said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. Love makes family, showing up makes family, being there in the hard times makes family. I nodded, knowing she was right but still feeling the ache of rejection that had followed me my entire life. Later that night, after Linda and Robert had gone home and Ethan was asleep, I sat down at my computer and saw that my mother had tagged me in a social media post. Heartbroken that my eldest daughter has become so greedy and selfish after her husband's death. Refusing to help her struggling sister even though she now has 2 apartments in the city center and plenty of money. Material wealth has changed her. I stared at the screen, watching as sympathetic comments poured in from relatives and family friends who only knew whatever twisted version of the story my mother had fed them. Don't let Ella get away with this. Family should help family. Poor Jessica, always struggling while Ella has everything handed to her. I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I'd experienced before. This was a new low, even for my mother, trying to publicly shame me into giving them Mark's money. I took a deep breath and started typing. If my mother wanted to air our family's dirty laundry in public, then I would give the public the full, unedited version. I've been silent about this for too long, but since my mother has chosen to make our private family matters public, I feel I must respond. 3 days ago, we buried my husband, Mark, after his 2-year battle with stomach cancer. My parents and sister did not attend his funeral. Why? Because my sister had scheduled a party to celebrate her promotion on the same day, and they felt that was more important. For those who don't know, Mark helped my parents financially many times over the years, including paying for major repairs to their home and funding my sister's entire college education. Despite this, when I needed help during his illness, even just watching our son for a few hours, they were always too busy. Yesterday, they showed up uninvited to the reading of Mark's will. Upon learning that he had left me and our son financially secure, they immediately demanded that I give one of our rental properties to my sister because, and I quote, she needs it more than some child. That some child is their 9-year-old grandson, who just lost his father. I share this not to hurt them, but because I'm tired of being painted as the villain in a story where I've only ever tried to be a good daughter, sister, wife, and mother. Mark's money will be used for our son's education and future, as he intended. I hope this clears things up. I attached the screenshots I'd saved, including the message where my mother had said Jessica's party was more important than Mark's funeral, and several texts where they declined to help during his illness. My finger hovered over the post button for several seconds before I finally pressed it. Within minutes, the comments on my mother's original post changed tone drastically. Karen, is this true? You skipped your son-in-law's funeral for a party? I can't believe you'd expect Ella to give away property meant for her son. Those text messages are shocking. How could you say a party is more important than a funeral? Calls and messages came in throughout the evening, relatives and friends expressing shock at my parents' behavior and offering support. My mother tried to claim in the comments that I was lying, but the screenshots spoke for themselves. Eventually, she deleted her original post entirely, but the damage to her reputation was done. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls from my parents and Jessica. I blocked their numbers without listening to their voicemails. Whatever they had to say, I wasn't interested in hearing it. Over the following weeks, they tried everything to contact me, emails begging for forgiveness, but still asking for money, messages through mutual friends, even showing up at our house unannounced. Each time, I stood firm in my decision to cut them out of our lives. They're never going to change, are they? I asked Linda one afternoon as we watched Ethan play in the backyard. People rarely do, she replied honestly. Not fundamentally, anyway. It's strange. I always thought I needed their approval, their love. I spent my whole life trying to earn it, but now you recognize your own worth, she finished for me. And you see that Ethan deserves better than to repeat that cycle. 6 months after Mark's death, life had settled into a new normal. Linda and Robert continued to be fixtures in our lives, joining us for Sunday dinners and helping with Ethan's school activities. I had started managing the rental properties Mark had left us, finding unexpected satisfaction in the work. The apartments in the city center turned out to be excellent investments, providing a steady income that supplemented what I'd put aside for Ethan's education. I also invested some of the money in shares of companies Mark had always believed in, watching with satisfaction as the dividends rolled in. As for my parents and Jessica, I occasionally heard updates through the family grapevine. They were struggling financially. Apparently, Jessica had lost her job, and my parents were complaining about retirement costs. Each time, the messenger would awkwardly hint that perhaps I could help them out. My answer was always the same: I'm sorry to hear they're having trouble, but my responsibility is to my son. Some called me cold or unforgiving. Maybe I was. But when I looked at Ethan, growing stronger and happier each day, surrounded by people who truly loved him, I knew I'd made the right choice. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, he asked a question that caught me off guard. Mom, do you ever miss Grandma Karen and Grandpa David? I paused, considering how to answer honestly without burdening him with adult problems. I miss the relationship I wish we'd had, I said finally. But not the one we actually had. He nodded, seeming to understand more than a child his age should have to. I'm glad we have Grandma Linda and Grandpa Robert. Me too, buddy, me too. Some people would never understand why I'd cut my birth family out of my life. They'd never experienced the constant disappointment, the lifelong pattern of favoritism, the painful realization that some people are simply incapable of putting others first. But I understood. And more importantly, I'd broken the cycle. Ethan would grow up knowing his worth, surrounded by people who showed their love through actions, not just words. People who showed up when it mattered, who didn't put conditions on their support, who didn't see him as a means to an end.